Hi everyone. Oslo, Norway's capital, has a new unified visual identity. Now the city of Oslo has one coherent identity representing all the units, services within the city of Oslo. In order to do this, we had to have an inclusive and transparent process to reducing the number of logos from 250 to 1. We had 1,500 people working for the city of Oslo actively taking part in the design process. I work for Creuna. We're a customer experience agency, and we're a Nordic company, and we have offices in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. And I've had the pleasure of managing this project in Creuna. So first of all, I'm going to show you a video.
Oslo, Norway's capital, is a modern and growing city loved by its residents. It has 15 districts, 36 agencies, 53,000 employees, and countless projects and initiatives. But with over 250 logos in use, this caused confusion and clutter. That's why we created one identity to unite Oslo. 3 shapes, inspired by Oslo's streetscapes, are the basic building blocks of the identity system. The system is flexible and simple enough to be used by everyone for everything. The digital design assistant we created gives all 53,000 city employees the power to design communications themselves, easily, quickly, and correctly. Our font, Oslo Sans, is functional, versatile, and usable everywhere. The design is inspired by generations of Oslo street signs. Dots and punctuation marks are transformed into Oslo shapes. The design system adapts to the diversity of the city's institutions and services. It creates a unified identity across all channels and is designed for use in 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, and motion. The new identity is a great tool to help Oslo and its residents to continue to connect and thrive together.
So you just seen the new visual identity for Oslo. It's distinctive yet flexible. It's unifying with only one logo representing the whole city. So now it's easier for the residents to understand what the city does. I'm born and raised in Oslo myself. This is me and my sister outside the Royal Palace at the Constitution Day a few years back. I felt very privileged when we started this work, but also felt very humble. The city seal is almost 100 years old, and the new identity is going to be very visible for all the residents in Oslo for many years to come. So we really had to make something great and something that everybody in Oslo could be proud of, so no pressure. So back to where we started. So the aim of this work and the ambition was to create this new coherent interface between the city and its residents, and to modernize and simplify the visual identity, and to make it clear and more comprehensible for the citizens. But this is probably the most complex branding projects in Norway in a very long time. To make 250 different organizations give up their own identity, that's not an easy task. And the complexity of both the political process and the bureaucratic process to get this approved by the city council was a lot more complicated than we ever could imagine when we started. It's actually been quite overwhelming, and not only for us, but also for our client. And it is the type of project that does not fit at all into very strict how these political procedures work. And it's working with something visual and make that into a political process really caused a few headaches for the lawyers working in the city hall. But finally, March 27 last year, this new identity was approved by the City Council, and that was obviously a big milestone for us. But this is how it looked when it started. The city had more than 250 logos, and because of this, it was really difficult for the citizens to understand what the city did, what kind of services it provided, but also how our tax money is being spent. It's also hugely complicated and expensive to manage all these different identities. So it was estimated that it cost the city of Oslo about £5 million every year to maintain all these different identities. But we knew that this was going to be complicated. Oslo, the city of Oslo has more than 50,000 people, employees. And it's organized in all these different sub-organizations and units. The city of Oslo has different roles in people's lives, as a service provider, as an authority, and a policymaker. And obviously, the people that work for all these different organizations, they had emotional attachment to the identity of their own organization. And all the residents in Oslo had an emotional attachment to the city seal. And then, obviously, we had to maneuver into this quite unpredictable political landscape that can be quite interesting from time to time. The layers of information are increasing, and they're becoming more complex, and there's more players trying to get our attention. So today, obviously, is more important than ever to present ourselves in a coherent, humane, and coherent and clear way. So what we tried to do to develop this new system, we had to identify a robust yet simple-to-use brand strategy and a brand structure. So we had to identify the Lego bricks in this system that could help us reduce the amount of logos and make it more tangible to the citizens, yet entail any kind of eventualities. So how could we identify those Lego bricks? So we could easily have spent half the budget on initial insight. There were so many questions that needed to be answered. But we had a very short insight phase, just enough to ask early hypotheses. And then we've been working in many, many, many iterations, bringing new people into the process. And we started very early making sketches, and not only for the identity in itself, but also for the brand platform and also for the brand structure. And then we asked those different user groups, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? And after feedback, and then we could adjust, and each time we could be more precise. Design by committee is something that used as a negative term because you have to do lots of compromises. We actually say that for us, design by committee has been something positive because in such a complex organization, we really needed to involve those 1,500 people to secure enough ownership for the solutions that we made. Another thing is that we've been working really closely with the client. We've had a great client and we've been working as one team. And we've also been vulnerable and honest and fully transparent. And I think that's been crucial that we together, worked against this big political system. And finally, we managed to get this new identity approved. This is a slide with lots of information and it's even in Norwegian. So the aim here is not for you to read and understand it, but it just shows how we worked with development and insight, in all these different iterations. Oslo is loved by its residents, but the city government and the municipality, people don't have the same feelings towards that. They're not as positive. But Oslo has gone through a major change over the last few decades and is really going through a positive change. New services is becoming more sustainable, it's becoming more social, new areas are being developed. And the city of Oslo has been crucial for all this development, but still, the city of Oslo is not really recognized for all the positive work that the city government has been doing. And one of the reasons is because it was really difficult for people to understand how the city worked and what they actually did. So between this positive attitude in general and the possibility for the city of Oslo to present itself in a more coherent and more relevant way, we saw a big potential to build closer bonds between the city and its residents. So we developed this new user-friendly brand or identity with a monolithic brand structure with only one logo representing all the different organizations within the city of Oslo. And having only one logo helps to unite everything that Oslo does. And it makes it more tangible, but also it's a lot easier for the city of Oslo to maintain only one identity. In the communication as well, we shortened the name. In Norwegian, the Norwegian translation is, in English it's called the City of Oslo, but in Norwegian it was the Municipality of Oslo. So we shortened the name, so now in the logo it's only Oslo. And it's a lot easier to use, and for all those different organizations as well, we found that it was a lot easier for them to identify themselves with only Oslo. New visual identities is something that always creates lots of attention. We see that every time. And obviously when your own city gets new visual identity, that's something that will generate a lot of interest. Because of the political process, we actually had to do a pre-launch. So when the identity was still under development, and that was really painful because we have to launch something that wasn't finished. And it got like a lot of noise the first time, so it was like headline news in Norway for about a week. All the major newspapers were writing, and it was mostly negative. As you know, people don't like change in general, and social media went bananas with lots of negative comments, and that was an interesting week. But it also became a massive user test, and we actually taken a lot of that feedback, and we did some changes to the identity after that pre-launch. So, we feel that that was really along the lines of how we worked with this project. So this is the old city seal from 1924. And as you can see, there's lots of details and it's very complex. So it doesn't really work in lots of the touch points we use today, especially small digital touch points. And that was also one of the reasons why a lot of these organizations started to develop their own identity. So we had to simplify and we had to modernize in able to make it work. And also to make it according to a universal design, which actually is a legal requirement in Norway. So we had to take some tough decisions, and after a lot of testing, which are the elements, and this is, by the way, it's called Saint Halvard, so he's like the saint of Oslo, and there's a story behind him. And so we had to test, which are the elements that we had to keep. So, so we tried to find the balance between modernize, but also keep enough of the history of St. Halvard. So, we tested everything. Everybody loved the donuts, by the way, but we felt that that was, we're taking away too much of the history. So, we couldn't do that, even though we loved the visuals of it. And to the more kind of like illustrative style. And we've been testing several hundred, maybe 1,000 different logos, working closely with the client, but also lots of tester group, before we eventually ended up here. So these are the colors. The blue is an important color for Oslo. We have the Oslo fjord, but also we have all the trams in Oslo are blue, and also the Oslo version of the national costume is blue, so that was a quite obvious color. Green from the forest around Oslo and also from the park. And then we also have some warmer colors that are inspired by typical colors that you can find on facades throughout the city. To design an identity for such a complex organization, we had to find a system that gave us enough flexibility. So these three basic shapes are the foundation of the identity. And we're inspired by the cityscapes in the architecture. And obviously, you can't take ownership to a square or a circle, but the way we use them and the way we put them together is something that makes it unique and also makes it recognizable. We can also find those shapes in the logo, and they're actually an important part of the history around St. Halvard. So the system is based on a simple grid that dictates how the shapes are placed. And this grid gives almost like an unlimited number of possibilities, at the same time making it quite recognizable and also simple to use. We had to make something that could be scaled up and scaled down depending on what kind of communication needs. As we said, there's a broad spectrum of communication needs that this identity need to entail. We also developed an illustration style, and we started here with the grid and also with the shapes, but we wanted to make something slightly more organic to make it less abstract. So these are some of the illustrations. And then they can obviously be animated to give them more life and also a bit more playfulness. Fonts is an important part of the identity, and this is inspired by the street signs around the city that's been there for many years and also unique to Oslo. And we wanted to make something unique, but also recognizable. It had to be highly legible. It had to be according to universal design, but also something that could be used across all types of touch points and basically anything you can think about. Some touch points are more authoritative and formal, while other ones are more friendly. And everything needs to, this identity needs to cover everything. And there's a wide range of touch points for this identity, like reception areas, waste trucks. We even played around with some ideas about how we can use them as like physical and ideas for urban areas and furniture. Signage is another important touch point, and it's probably the most visible touch point throughout the city. The city of Oslo has a lot of signs. And here we want to take advantage of that system and the grid. So we want to develop guidelines around a modular system. Again, we're thinking like Lego bricks that gives us a lot of flexibility. So this is then the basis for the signage system. And here is an example for some of the signs. Guidelines for motion design is also an important part of the identity. And since the identity is inspired by the city and the cityscape, we wanted the motion design also to reflect that. So this means that you won't see the shapes move around, but they always enter and exit within the grid and staying true to the overall visual look. So when we had the motion design principle in place, we then could start detail in the dynamic design. And we quickly decided that the shapes should contract and extract within their own boundaries, and that the motion design should communicate something solid yet flexible. And this could be applied as a design guideline for UI and animation, and also in web design. And it could be used for transitions in films. The next thing I'm going to show is where we're taking the motion design a step further, and where those forms also react on audio input. So for digital touchpoints, functionality is more important than visual playfulness. So the focus on the digital touchpoints has been to tie those shapes into functionality, and in this way create a clear identity that doesn't come at the expense of usability. And the first version of the Oslo website that was using the new design system was launched in June 2019. And it consists of several thousand pages of a wide range of content and character. So in constructing this system, it's been essential to establish a component-based solution. And the components are the basis for all new digital service to be used. And is made so the components can be reused and implemented through a component library to all the different digital touchpoints. So the new design system offers a great variety yet being very consistent. So it's easily recognizable and give a coherent user experience throughout the different touchpoints. And this was not the case before we introduced a new design system. In a big organization like the city of Oslo, with more than 50,000 people, there's always going to be lots of design needs where there's no budget for hiring a professional designer. So we made a digital design assistant. So here the users, all the employees in Norway, they can make their own design without having any design skills or having any design software. So they can use a template and they upload that image and they type in the text. And then this design tool will then automatically generate a unique design, then they can then easily export it. And this makes the identity accessible for everybody, and it reduces the cost of design, and most importantly, I think, we secure that everything is within the guidelines for the identity. So these are just a few examples of some of the designs that are generated through this tool. And I think it gives a great variety, yet being very consistent. So the implementation has just started, and the implementation will go on for the next 3 to 4 years. And it's great to see the new identity being more and more visible throughout the city. So we have used design as a means to make the city more comprehensible and more tangible for the citizens. And we've done so through this iterative process. We've been testing and adjusted throughout the process. And this improved transparency for the new identity helps build closer bond between the city and its residents, and a virtual platform in which democracy in itself can flourish. Thanks a lot for your attention.